right, this is the scene right now in Chapel, New York. This is Hillary Clinton's home base here. She is preparing to leave for, I believe, the New York's Peninsula Hotel before heading on to the Jacob Javits Center to give what she hopes, I'm sure, is a victory speech, although we're told that she, like Donald Trump, have a victory and a concession speech ready at the go. I don't know if Doris Kearns Goodwin has ever written such speeches, but she has heard them from both sides, the noted presidential historian, on the importance of this very big evening. Doris, very good to have you. Thanks for coming.
You're very welcome.
All right, so your sense, first of all, of what's at stake tonight. I caught your remarks. I think you were addressing a crowd recently out in California where it was bemoaning a very divisive, nasty election, not unprecedented, but right up there. How do you think we'll all come together, no matter who wins tonight?
Well, I think the one thing that history tells us is while we always think we're living through the worst of times, and there's lots of structural reasons why this could be difficult after this election, if one of the candidates doesn't accept it, if there's polarization that cannot be gotten through in the Congress, and yet I look more optimistically. I mean, think about some of the troubling elections we had in the past. In 1912, Teddy and Taft, when they ran against each other, Taft, the sitting president, Teddy, the actual former president who came against his old friend, there was such vitriol. He called Taft a pinhead with the brain of a guinea pig. Taft said Teddy was going to be a dictator. The New York Times said this is such an embarrassing campaign that we must all have a blush on our cheeks as to what foreigners are thinking about us.
That was before cable news.
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, that was the first primary system, so that's where it all began.
Right.
And maybe that's the fruit of which we're getting now.
But that primary system created the very thing that party bosses didn't like, that they lost hold of and control of. That's been the rap,
exactly.
Depending on your views of Donald Trump, but where we are now. What do you think happens if Donald Trump were to lose tonight? Way too early, we don't know. What happens then? Do parties reassess?
You know, I think what the party may have to think about having more sense of, if not control, more influence over who the nominee is. I mean, parties are supposed to exist mainly for nominating a candidate. And in the old days, they did it in the conventions. And then we came home, and then suddenly we had 2 months only in the fall for the election. I think many of us would love to go back to that. It's hard to turn your back on democracy once it's gone forward, which a primary system recommends. But still, the Democrats had more control this year because they had more superdelegates that were there for Hillary from the beginning. The Republicans ceded that control to the primary.
But, you know, many of those Democrats are bitter and angry about that process, and it might not matter and Hillary Clinton wins, but it leaves raw nerves.
No, I understand. It's really a tension, but it's a real tension in American life. If the parties mean anything at all, you want the party leaders, if you trust them, to have some greater say in who the person is. Now, the interesting thing that happens after 1912, as bitter as that was, eventually Taft and Teddy reconciled their own personal relationship. Eventually, the Republican Party, even though it lost then to the Democrats, they then win 3 presidential elections. They've come back together, the progressive and conservative wings. So we've seen that as history. We saw Al Gore in that incredible problem that he had with Mr. Bush. It went 36 days before the election was even decided, and he comes out and gives a speech that says, I will meet Bush. I want to heal these divisions as soon as possible, reminding people that when Stephen Douglas lost to Lincoln, he said, we're all patriots now first. So history allows you to hope that when a person gets the mantle of the presidency over them, there is a sense that we're going to give legitimacy to that person.
But it really depends on the size of the victory, right, Doris? I mean, obviously that was such a nail-biter. You could make the argument that Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, if it's a real close one tonight, would be looking for any avenue, any opportunity, much as, now, he didn't formally challenge it. John Kerry looked at Ohio, or his people did, in 2004. If it's close enough or could make a difference in a crucial state, all legal options are open, right?
Well, on the other hand, though, look at President Nixon when he lost the first time in 1960.
You're right.
I mean, look how close that election was. And I think, and it was a good decision on his part. For the good of the country, he did not contest that. As I said, Al Gore went right away after it finally was decided and said, you know, we are all in this together. The rule of law, the Supreme Court has spoken. Even way, way back when Jefferson beat Adams, and it was the first time the Republicans had won because the Federalists had been in power. It was the first peaceful transfer of power. And he comes right out and says, we're all Republicans, we're all Federalists. So it's going to depend on whoever the loser is. A lot is weighing tonight on the dignity and the willingness, I think, of that loser to look at the election and know what his responsibilities or her responsibilities are to the country.
Some of them are so close, right? I mean, if you just go by polls going into this, Florida separated by a point, Pennsylvania by 2 points, Michigan 3 points, within the margin of error, so anything can happen. But regardless of whether one accepts the other, I'm just worried about how the nation then moves forward. We've had 16 years of this acrimony, very little getting done. I talked to Emanuel Cleaver, of course, you know, as a minister by training and tries to work with both sides. But he was just saying, Neil, it's very tough in this environment, right or left. So can you see anything approaching normalcy returning to Washington? And by the way, this is looking at Hillary now leaving Chappaqua for the Peninsula Hotel and what she hopes will be later on a victory speech tonight. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I understand how tough it is. I mean, I think the polarization is not just political, it's economic, it's social. It's been a long time coming now. It's not just been the last 8 years. When you think about it, you think about the Clinton impeachment, and you think about the problems that Bush Jr. had, and then the problems Obama's having reaching across the aisle. Something's happened to the structure of our government and to our lack of faith in each other on the other side, looking at the other side as evil, not being willing to even talk to the other side. My only hope is that the American people, it's interesting, they're coming out and voting a lot today. People thought they'd be so dismissive of this election they wouldn't even want to vote. And maybe they're saying to both parties right now, you've gone down there to Washington to do our business. Just get to it. Stop what you're doing. There's such a sense of frustration with politicians. Politicians are losing their sense of an honorable vocation, being a political figure. So I still have a feeling that maybe both sides are going to realize something has to change. And maybe we've reached that point with this election because it's been so disheartening for so many people to see the course and dialogue that this election has brought to us.
You are an inherently good person, but you're naive. All right, I don't know. I'm kidding.
You know what? You may be right, but I think, you know what? You got to have optimism. You got to have hope.
About that.
What's the
we've
point?
gotten through far worse, more divisive times. But I guess what I'm asking you is, I had Ken Langonia, the Home Depot co-founder. He's a Republican, likes Donald Trump. But when I asked him flippantly whether he would ever entertain running for office, he said, no way, no way. More or less saying what others say. It's a demeaning, very long process. Everything is out there. They vilify you on the left and right. Just not worth it. I wonder with young people, I know your own son ran for office and all, but does it really make young people, all people, very cynical and jaded to say, no, never?
No, I think that's a real problem. I mean, to the extent that politicians don't have that same sense of excitement about being a political figure, to the extent they have to spend so much time raising money, dialing for dollars, their private lives are going to be exposed in a way that they may not want to be. Perhaps our best people are not entering public life. And that's why I keep hoping that more and more people who've been in the military will go into public life, because they know what it's like to have a common mission, a common purpose, to put themselves in honor of their country. That's why I wish there could be some national service program so more young people could do something like that, and maybe that would bring those kind of people into public life. But right now, it's not one of those times when, being a politician, you keep saying, oh, I can't wait to be one of those guys in Washington.
Yeah,
that's a problem for us, but we have to change that.
All right. Doris, thank you. So many stunning bestsellers, The Bully Pulpit, Team of Rivals. She's written on every major U.S. president, and even the not-so-major ones. So history tells us we always get through this sort of stuff. Doris, thank you very, very much. There you go.